I don't really have any complaints about this movie. I don't know. I don't know if it's perfect, but I think its imperfections kind of define it, you know? I don't know. I know that sounds kind of pretentious and artsy-fartsy, but it's just this little ramshackle work, and I think the Blu-ray looks great. The new Blu-ray just looks terrific.
20th Century Fox presents Phantom of the Paradise, a gothic horror story.
What was that?
Our love,
A beautiful love story.
whole love, baby.
Like a circus.
A cinematic odyssey through the rock universe. From Greece to glitter and beyond. The story of a sound, the man who created it, the girl who sang it, the monster who stole it, and the phantom who haunts the paradise, the ultimate rock palace.
Obviously, I'm talking about Phantom of the Paradise, the 1974 Brian DePlama horror, comedy, satire, explosion. Musical psychodrama, comedy, vintage horror, homage, that just came out of nowhere and kind of went nowhere. But over the years has garnered a following, a cult following. This is the quintessential cult film. The quintessential cult film in the tradition of an Eraserhead, a Rocky Horror Picture Show, and El Topo. The Phantom of the Paradise, Phantom's crowd is, I think, a lot smaller than those other films, but it's still very, very, very large. And hopefully with the new release it will grow. Now, you know, I should say first of all, this show is a love letter to Phantom of the Paradise. You know, as far as the technical details, plot analyses, all of other stuff. There have been podcasts which have done it better. There have been documentaries that have done it better. The documentary on the original French DVD, which has been ported to the new Scream Factory Blu-ray release. They've all done it better than I will, because it's just so much information about this film, an explosion of information within the past decade have just come out about Phantom of the Paradise, because so many people have just kind of discovered it for the first time and like, my God, this is a treasure, this is a jewel in the rough. And have kind of latched onto it, I think with good reason, because it's a great film. It's a great, great, great classic, you know, one of my favorite musicals. And I don't like musicals, but I love the music of the 70s, specifically the work of Paul Williams, who was the creator, the composer of Phantom of the Paradise. So where can we begin with a simple plot analysis? Phantom of the Paradise, which is kind of a riff on the Gaston Leroux Phantom of the Opera, is about a young composer, Winslow Leach, played by frequent Brian DePlama collaborator William Finley. Winslow Leach, a rather thin, tall, lanky, bug-eyed, with these gigantic glasses, who is a writer, a singer-writer, whose music is stolen by this kind of enigmatic combination of Dorian Gray and a slimy 60s, 70s record producer, Swan, the mysterious Swan, played by Phantom of the Opera's composer, Paul Williams. So Swan frames Winslow Leach. He gets thrown in jail. His teeth are removed. Pretty much he loses everything. Loses half of his face in a prison attempt where a a record press actually presses part of a record into Winslow's face, a record which is a ripoff of his music, which Swan stole. Winslow becomes this phantom who decides to seek revenge on Swan by terrorizing Swan's latest conquest, which is the reopening of the Paradise Theater. And through this, he reconnects with Swan. He makes a Faustian deal with the devil to have his music sung by the young ingenue Phoenix, played wonderfully by Jessica Harper of Suspiria, and so forth. Obviously there is the double cross from Swan. Phoenix becomes the fulcrum in this kind of in the teeter board of life between Swan and Winslow, and it ends, of course, in a very catastrophic, busy finale, a live marriage murder hit attempt on stage, freak out event where the crowd starts cheering on the murder and mayhem on the stage, which for the crowd is indiscernible from entertainment. Which again, this is a kind of a part of the satire of the film, that murder and mayhem is somehow becoming indistinguishable from actual entertainment. With the headlines of Vietnam and the kind of war tragedies unfolding before us in our homes for our entertainment and perusal. Again, it ends very tragically, but with a lot of great music and songs and homages, and it goes here and there, and it's just so wild and freaky that if you haven't seen it, it's just like, my God, this is the movie to, if one of your friends has not seen it, just freak them out with, just watch it. It's just great, unless they hate good music, that's it. Usually it was for a time period, the music of the 70s, the music of Paul Williams, what they call the smooth, what Paul Williams calls codependent anthems. You and Me Against the World, We've Only Just Begun, all of this stuff that he wrote. He wrote with Paul Williams co-wrote with Roger Nichols, and they did some other stuff, and this kind of sappy 70s Carpenters, Three Dog Night, just an old-fashioned love song. Again, another Paul Williams track. It was kind of in the 80s and 90s, it was very out of fashion. Even in the late 70s, it was out of fashion when punk was coming in, all this different musical styles, heavy rock, Led Zeppelin. It was just not. It was out of step with that. It was seen as very clean cut and out of step with the times. The liberated, loud rock era. Rock and disco and punk and new wave and stuff. And so it kind of got misplaced for a number of years. And Paul Williams himself got misplaced for a number of years. He fell into drug abuse and addiction and a kind of Napoleonic complex, heavy ego, because Paul Williams came from nothing and originally wanted to become an actor because he was enthralled with movies, and then eventually branched out into music, working in television, and his television work, kind of television acting, music, collaborating with Roger Nichols. Then he got involved. Then he had his first number one hit, "We've Only Just Begun," which was actually a song written for a television commercial for a bank. A fucking bank, wanted to, one of the. It's a long story, but it traverses the modern world of advertising, where we don't want to just put a product up there and say, hey, we're a bank. We want to have young couples living their lives, and we want to project a certain lifestyle, and along with that, score that lifestyle with a great song like We've Only Just Begun. And then Richard Carpenter of the supergroup The Carpenters, hearing that television commercial and saying, hey, is there a full song there, and finding Paul Williams and recording the track and it being a hit, and then moving on to other things. So, I personally always had a love and affinity for Paul Williams, and it was, again, kind of awakened by this film, Phantom of the Paradise. Phantom of the Paradise became a staple of mid-90s afternoon cable broadcasts. I think it showed on Flicks, Showtime, HBO, or I'm sorry, not Flicks. Flicks is a channel, isn't it? Encore. It showed on the Encore movie networks. Very, heavy throughout the mid-90s. And I always remember coming home from high school and being bummed out, and watching this story of an outsider and his his travails, and a creator, an artist, his travails of being exploited by this kind of this kind of Dorian Gray impresario type Swan, and the beautiful music, and just being caught up in the drama and the technical virtuosity of an early Brian DePlama, because remember, he'd only done a few movies before this. He'd done his early films, his early student films like Murder a la Mode and all that stuff, and Dionysus in '69, and just very kind of wild, very exploratory, experimental stuff. And then he made Sisters, which was a very kind of traditional Hitchcock-esque type of film, even scored with Hitchcock's composer Bernard Herrmann, which was an AIP film and made some money. And that was, again, and Sisters was also kind of another staple of mid-90s cable. You'd see Sisters a lot for some reason. These things would kind of bubble in and show. And he moved on to this, from this idea of, again, it's a very Brian DePlama idea, full of, the wit and the satire and this stuff that, these themes which kind of, this exploitation and these ideas which kind of bobble and ebb throughout The Outsider, that kind of bob and weave throughout his filmography of this, basically, it is kind of a remake of Phantom of the Opera. I've never seen the Universal Claude Rains Phantom of the Opera. Universal sued this production. It was one of a couple of lawsuits which Phantom of the Paradise became embroiled in after it was completed, and that was really a downer for Brian DePlama and the producers. But for me, the film feels really heavy, heavily reminiscent of the Hammer Phantom of the Opera that Hammer did, which is different, right? It's a different movie. Yeah, and I saw that about 5 years ago. I saw the Hammer Phantom of the Opera, and it's this musician whose music is stolen, and his face is burned, and it felt to me like, oh my God, this is just such a replay of Phantom of the Opera, of rather Phantom of the Paradise, And then the guy who runs one of the main Phantom of the Paradise fan websites found this issue of a National Lampoon magazine, which has a whole comic story, I believe, of a story of a guy, a Phantom of the Fillmore, I believe. I believe it actually is. The name of the thing is Phantom of the Fillmore, something similar to that. And it's basically a replay, which is, Phantom of the Fillmore was the original title of Phantom of the Paradise. And apparently it's very, very, very reminiscent of the story. So there's all these feelings that Brian DePlama maybe could have borrowed elements from Phantom of the Fillmore, could have borrowed elements from the Universal film, could have borrowed elements from the Hammer film. And, a lot of that comes into play because a lot of people feel that Brian De Palma's borrowed a lot of story elements throughout many films from Hitchcock directly, that he's borrowed a number of cinematic devices from Hitchcock over the years. That obsession is very much like Vertigo, that all these things are Rear Window, like Body Double, and all of these ideas, like killing off Angie Dickinson in the film Dressed to Kill. Very reminiscent of Janet Leigh and Psycho. Again, spoiler, I'm sorry. You need to watch these films. This is a spoiler podcast, but again, all of these elements, a lot of people will put down and accuse De Palma and say this guy's a big hype and a ripoff. De Palma's defense to that is that hey, Hitchcock is working in a kind of specific film grammar, and I'm using that film grammar and kind of paying tribute to the master, in a sense that Hitchcock's level of craft was so high that he almost is creating this kind of architecture that it's almost like how I build a house is just I'm building with these lines and these things and this architecture is so solid that I'm using it on my own and building my own stories and concepts around it. So it's not really homage in a sense of like this is how you can do this type of story. Again, it's a you can take it or leave it, and whatever, and you can also follow the great axiom that the great artists steal, but in any case, De Palma makes this story of musical exploitation his own. And I mean, it's a satire. It was what was going on in the 70s, which was a resurgence in nostalgia music. Of course, later on in the 70s, we had Grease. We had groups like Sha Na Na who were doing like 50s and 60s rock, early 60s and 50s kind of, rock and kind of a resurgence of that type of music in the 70s. And that type of thing. So that is part of Phantom of the Paradise. So that's reflected. We had, Swan, who was this kind of, Dorian Gray, Phil Spector-esque, type of producer, this kind of, and I mean, that's an archetype which is, very real, because there were people like Phil Spector, and then later the Rick Rubins, and the people who always are kind of, wearing the dark sunglasses, and the who stay in the shadows and are these enigmatic figures, and you can almost imagine one of these people kind of being, like a Dorian Gray-esque kind of person who made a pact with the devil and is kind of behind the scenes, kind of pulling the strings, which is kind of what an impresario or this kind of, Svengali producers are kind of what they're known for. So, again, all of these elements are kind of real, the exploitation of the artist, and that's all, there are so many stories of the 70s of Badfinger and what have you, all these artists being ripped off by the record companies and the agents and all of these vultures, and then the bikers of Altamont, who are guarding the Rolling Stones. That's, Swan has this cadre of bikers who break heads and keep the rabble away from him, and that's, again, all of that is real. So Brian De Palma, again, takes the influences around him and crafts this incredible story. and then populates the film with some great actors who are doing these great dramatic / comedic performances. Of course, the center of the film is William Finley, as this kind of William Finley, I mean, coming off from his last film performance at this point, which was, I guess, Sisters, where he played the French-Canadian chaperone of Margot Kidder's schizophrenic Siamese twin. He was crazy and wild in that. And he just brings that energy to this film. William Finley was a great actor. I mean, Sisters, where he plays that crazy doctor, and then Phantom of Paradise, where he's one of the great cinematic phantoms. I think that's what a lot of people lose in the conversation, is that really Claude Rains, Michael Crawford. I mean, he was for the stage. Julian Sands and fucking Dario, give me a fucking break, man. The Phantom is a guy who's lost everything, and is literally a shadow of himself. His only motive is revenge. That's all his machinery is moving toward, and he's a character just moving toward oblivion, there can never be a real true redemption for this character. He's been so damaged and hollowed out, and I think this film, unlike almost every other adaptation of Phantom of the Opera that I've seen, or any film kind of inspired by it, you feel the kind of exploitation, the hollowed out nature of this character, and you feel his relationship to Jessica Harper as Phoenix. Again, another bird, bird name in this film. Phoenix, as this just young singer actress who he meets in a lineup, at Swan's house, and immediately has this kind of attachment to her. And I always that scene in the hall, in the stairs, where he's doing the phrasing with her and telling her how to phrase the song. He always does this weird phrasing of the song, which is not how Paul Williams would sing it, and not how Jessica Harper would sing it either. But he does this weird, which is great because he's kind of instructing her, and you get that kind of moment there. And so Jessica Harper, a treasure, a real, an actress who could do also music, who was a legitimate singer as well, who had this very Karen Carpenter-esque voice, which just laid into Paul Williams tracks like Special to Me and Old Souls, which are just like classic tracks, And I mean, later on she would do Shock Treatment, and that was, again, with another kind of very heavy Richard O'Brien, who's another genius, from Rocky Horror Picture Show, another cult sensation. And she was great in it would be really amazing to see what Jessica Harper would have done in Rocky Horror Picture Show. Susan Sarandon is a great actress. I mean, she's not really that much of a singer, but Jessica Harper is a true singer. And I mean, she can do that stuff and just do it all day. And she has a real soulfulness and a sexiness and a sensuality and an honesty to her voice that is just really great. So she's great, and Winslow is great. Winslow and Phoenix, and then again, as I say, Paul Williams, who at this point in his life and career was on a high point. It was A&M Records. He had a number of written so many hits for the Carpenters and Three Dog Night, and he was going solo, and he was that kind of at the tippy top, and he was also being kind of recognized as an actor. Wasn't being recognized as an actress. Even though he's kind of androgynous, he was kind of the flavor of the month in the early 70s as far as doing little tiny bit parts and stuff like, Battle for the Planet of the Apes, and TV stuff, and of course he wrote The Rainbow Connection for Kermit, and his ego was exploding, so he was the perfect person to play this little Napoleon, this little music producer. Swan is just this character that again is somehow based on real people, and he's somehow this person like Swan has always kind of existed. This user, this orchestrator, this impresario. This goes back to music. This is like something ancient, that there always been these kind of things, these people who somehow have a contract with the devil, and just these manipulators and abusers, in the entertainment industry. As long as there has been an entertainment industry, as long as you've got someone creative, there's always been someone in the back, trying to pull the strings. And so it feels, it's a really great character, and wonderfully portrayed, as I said, by this guy who had the ego and had the motivation to really dig into this role. I couldn't imagine how, the original conception was of Paul Williams playing the Phantom. And, it's just, that could work on a certain level, but it would be a different film, and, it just worked perfect with William Finley as the Phantom, and Winslow, and Paul Williams as the Swan. And then the other characters, which dot this film. Mamoli, what was it? Phil Mamoli, or I'm sorry, as Swan's road manager, the big guy who was actually like really into the music business. He was a real music person, and he's in that. He was involved somehow with the band, right? And he was in that Martin Scorsese documentary, American Boy, about the guy who was the gun dealer in Taxi Driver. Had that little cameo. What was his name? It was Prince? Phil Prince? I'm getting all these names wrong. But he was he had a lot of crazy stories, and Martin Scorsese just made a documentary, just basically, which is this guy talking and telling stories about, killing somebody, and the crazy stuff he's went on in his life. And this guy, Mamoli, was a part of, that whole scene, that whole group. And that's in the film. So it brings that, again, that element around. The real people surrounding us were there. And, and then a little actors like Garrett Graham as Beef, and a small role, but again, he kind of, brings, his comedic talent to it. Garrett Graham is great in like Used Cars and other stuff. He's wonderful in this movie, as just the famous shower scene where he's singing Life at Last, and then the Phantom pushes the plunger into his face, and anyone that tries dies. It's great. It's just it's a film full of memorable scenes and memorable ideas, and it moves at breakneck pace. It moves like a living comic book. There's a lot of Brian DePlama uses all these cinematic techniques, the irises, and of course his signature split screen in the upholstery song, and in the upholstery musical number, supposed music number, the audition, the rehearsal, and then you see like undercrank stuff of just Winslow being chased out of the Swan building, and then and then that music, that like classic, silent movie type music, which is again kind of taking us out of the 70s. So it's a movie of different moods and different tones and styles of where this classic film stuff, and then as the string score, and which is very baroque and scary and kind of underscores a lot of a lot of this modern Dorian Gray Swan, who, unlike a painting, Swan has all these videotapes of everything, and Swan is ubiquitous. Swan is everywhere. He is the man who pulled the strings, who kind of observes everything, and in the original conception of the film, the original edit of the film, Swan was a lot more omnipresent. Everything had Swan Song on it, because that was the original, that was the holding corporation. This Swan's group was, his main company was Swan Song, and underneath that was Swan Song, was rather Death Records, which was supposed to be a subsidiary of Swan Song. But again, as I said, after this film was finished, there was there was a lawsuit with Peter Grant, who was Led Zeppelin, and he had the Swan Song Records, Swan Song Publishing, and so there was a dispute with that, and so they came for their money. As I said before, Universal sued him because of Phantom of the Opera, the Claude Rains film, and took some money. So it was, and then of course they had to edit out every Swan Song, because Swan Song was on the video monitors, it was on the tape machines, it was plastered everywhere. It was on the marquee, in the beginning of the film. And now when you watch the film, there's a lot of these things, these mats, which are very ugly, and it looks like, somebody's put a piece of like black electrical tape over part of the image, and then either stenciled Death Records or something over it. It just looks horrible because this was circa 1970s mats, and today you could pull out all of this stuff and it would be seamless. It would be 100% seamless. But now it's all ooky and messy. And it remains that way in the present Blu-ray issue, but it's still it's a compromise. It is one of the things that compromise the film. And the film feels low budget. After the first time you watch it, you're just so swept up in the newness of it and the outrageousness of it and the wide angle lenses and the movement and the motion and the music, which is just that what ties this film together is the rock solid soundtrack by Paul Williams. Great songs which you want to listen to over and over, which you can't get enough of, and which were Academy Award nominated, I believe. So it's that I think it's the music that ties it all together. Otherwise, the film, had a low budget. It was very ramshackle. The movie was shot partially, a few sets in California, shot a lot of exteriors in Dallas, Texas, and the Paradise Theater is the Majestic Theater in Dallas, and then part in New York, in the Brooklyn Academy of Music and some other places there. The record plant in Los Angeles, where the Tonto, the famous Moog modular synthesizer, which was used by Stevie Wonder on a lot of his hits, that room, it's basically a synthesizer with a lot of modular blocks, and you can patch different sounds into it. That is a legendary custom designed synthesizer. Which featured in a lot of record shoots, and because it's just very photogenic, it's a room that kind of wraps around the main keyboard, used by Stevie Wonder, as I said, I believe Intervisions and music songs in the Key of Life, and his kind of trio of groundbreaking soul pop music in the early 70s, and it was just again a freestanding area that they could just rent out and shoot some scenes in, and it becomes the Phantom's lair, his musical lair, and it looks beautiful. It's featured, of course, in all of the main poster art, the whole, and that was again a real thing, Tonto. So again, using real stuff, there wasn't gigantic sets. It was very low budget and very seat of your pants type stuff. But at the same time, it had some, again, great actors, great director, a great production designer, Jack Fisk, from Eraserhead and all the Paul Anderson films, Paul Thomas Anderson films, like There Will Be Blood, as of recent, and then, of course, the great Terrence Malick films like Days of Heaven and Badlands. This guy is an ace designer. He's fucking brilliant. He can, he can build stuff out of nothing, and a lot of arts and crafts. His girlfriend at the time, later on wife, Sissy Spacek, the actress from Carrie, she helped him out with this thing, and it was very, very seat of your pants, very homemade. But these people, they were such craftsmen, they had such an artistry that they brought it up to another level and made it a really spectacular film. And I can't say enough of it. I mean, it's just, despite the flaws, despite the low budget nature of it, despite the fact that they had to do so much editing to get around the swan song thing and the mats, and so there are elements of it that don't look that don't look as good as they could have if they had just been able to show the film as it was originally edited and not have to read it and do stuff, and there are flubs or goofs or areas where you see the camera. There's a lot of POV stuff, and it works okay. When you go back and you want to watch it so many times, you start kind of running into errors and problems and stuff like that, and that's inevitable with any film, and on a low budget film that's almost kind of goes to the territories, because you can't go back and reshoot things and control things. It's just kind of got to be there, Gary Kent was also great. Gary Kent is a local guy. I think he still lives in the Austin area, doesn't he? Or lives around here. Gary Kent was a famous B-movie stuntman, and he plays the Phantom in the when he's jumping up, when he climbs around the top of the Paradise Theater and jumps down and swings down and does all this action stuff. That was all Gary Kent. That wasn't the actor William Finley. Oh man, William Finley. He was great in Eaten Alive. Another weird role, I don't know what the hell happened to him. I don't know where he disappeared to. Of course he's deceased. He died a few years ago. I think one of his last films was The Black Dahlia, kind of getting back with Brian DePlama. But I haven't seen that film yet. I don't know. I don't know if it was any good. But definitely a great actor. Definitely just wide open. And as great as the music is, as great as everything is, Finley combined with the music of Paul Williams somehow embodies the spirit of this film, the kind of great anarchic story and music and action. Great film. So, the Phantom of the Paradise didn't do very well theatrically. It underperformed, much in the same way as Rocky Horror Picture Show, when there was the revival circuit. They tried to re-release Phantom of the Paradise and get that. They, made a new poster, which had artwork by Richard Corbin. That's the famous artwork of the keyboard kind of stretching into infinity, the Phantom out in front, dragging behind him a buxom beauty. That's the comic book art, which you'll see if you do a search for Phantom of the Paradise poster. The original poster art was there was a couple of ones. There was a retouched shot of the Phantom in that record plant with Tonto. He's looking up, and there was another one, this kind of neon thing with which I honestly don't like. It's the record cover. It's okay, but it feels too much like some kind of Broadway playbill type thing. I don't really like that John Alvin art with the kind of beef-looking character, blonde-haired on one side with the microphone, Phantom on the other side with a knife pretending it's a microphone, and then the guitar between them. Looks like a Gibson SG between them, with the head of the guitar at the top of the guitar's neck, the face of a swan kind of smiling, guffawing. It's a good art, but I like I like actually the Richard Corbin art, the re-release art. I think that's really good. But Phantom just really, I don't know. I don't know why people hated the film so much. I think the film has such a good soundtrack. It has such a rewatchability. I think just based on the soundtrack. If it was, and also it's Brian DePlama. It's Brian DePlama in his prime, experimenting, trying things out, doing stuff, and not all of it is 100% great, but it's 90% great. It's better than 90% of the shit that is pretending to be a musical comedy feature film, really. And it is still, in spite of some of its ramshackle elements, very well put together. The soundtrack is 100% well put together. Paul Williams had the full force of his studio expertise behind him at that point, and it is a monster music track. So the film languished on home video. I don't even think it was re-released in widescreen. There was just that Fox. Released theatrically in the United States by Fox. They got the U.S. rights. Released it on a home video with this cover art that's just a big still of Winslow Leach as the Phantom and his face with Phantom of the Paradise. You're like, what is this? It looks, like, oh, what is this? I don't know why they didn't want to use the Richard Corbin art, but I guess it was too comic booky and too different. Maybe that still of Winslow looked more like resembled more like a takeoff on a Rocky Horror. Maybe that was it. Maybe that was the thing. But it languished on home video, had the VHS release, had that Laserdisc. That fucking Laserdisc, what was it, released in the late 80s, early 90s? And that took us through the 80s and 90s, those releases. That was about it. I think there may have been a Japanese release. Of course, there were some foreign releases, what have you. And then in the early 2000s, Fox, again, the emergence of the DVD format, they released Phantom on DVD with no extras, I believe. I bought the DVD and sold it many years ago. It was, again, the cover art is just this still of the Phantom about the swing with Phantom of the Paradise in red, right? Or is it the face still just kind of blackened out? I've forgotten. So, it's so long ago. It was very unimpressive, and it was just, again, just a couple of years before this, they'd done such a great special edition of Rocky Horror, but Phantom just didn't get any respect, and and then in the ensuing years you had a French DVD release of Phantom of the Paradise, which was a two-disc set, which I bought and I still have, and it's a beautiful set. It's a cardboard type cover where it has a lip that it's velcroed in and opens up, and it's the half head of Winslow Leach that it opens up. It's very much like the original Anchor Bay Divimax special edition of Day of the Dead, with Bub's head that kind of flips over. It's that same concept, almost the exact same cover concept. And it had some good extras. It had the film remastered. It was a PAL DVD. The film remastered had a great long documentary called Paradise Regained, with interviews with Brian DePlama, Jessica Harper, Paul Williams, William Finley, Garrett Graham, all of the principals. And then some interviews with the costume designer, Rosanna Norton, which is kind of like a home video stuff. and then a little cute little 1 or 2 minute thing where William Finley shows the Phantom of the Paradise Japanese doll, which is now going for a good $250 to $600 on eBay. It's just this ridiculous amount. This little Phantom of the Paradise, like G.I. Joe size doll. And that release was ported to Blu-ray later on, that same transfer. Then later on, I think earlier this year, it was November of 2013, I believe, in the UK, the United Kingdom, Arrow, a new up-and-coming, really great upstart Blu-ray powerhouse, released a special edition of Phantom of the Paradise, a UK Blu-ray, which had a lot of those features from the Paradise Regained and some of those interviews, and added a music track, I believe an isolated music track, and some other stuff. Contemptuous because it had a remastered high-definition transfer, which looked a lot different than transfers of Phantom of the Paradise we've seen before. It looked, a lot darker, and it had kind of a more golden texture. I've not seen the transfer myself, but it's, I've seen screenshots. It's different. Now, in the end, again, diehard Phantom fans, had to import that as they'd imported the French releases. Now, as of August 2014, we have the new release, the new American U.S. release of Phantom of the Paradise from Scream Factory. And my God, I've just gotten it. It is a great release. I'm still pouring through the extras. Remastered 1080p high definition picture. 7.1 sound. It looks beautiful. It looks somewhere between the old transfer and the new transfer. It's color corrected. It's a lot brighter than the UK Blu-ray transfer, but still with a different type of colors, which, again, the sycophants will argue over for ad infinitum. But great picture, great sound, incredible extras, a 2-disc set, one Blu-ray, one DVD. Blu-ray contains 2 commentary tracks, some interview tracks from Garrett Graham and Jessica Harper, and then a 1 track from Jack Fisk, which I've listened to the Jack Fisk track, and it's great. A lot of details about the story of Jack Fisk's early life and his early work in film, stories about Terrence Malick and Badlands and Brian De Palma, and his hands-on construction of sets and makeup and all. Phantom of the Paradise was such a low-budget film. Everybody was pitching in. So that's great. Great interviews with Paul Williams and Brian De Palma. And then we go to disc 2, where we have Paradise Regained, the great documentary from the French release. We have about an hour, 24-minute, over an hour interview, Guillermo del Toro interviewing Paul Williams, and just getting out all these little great nuggets about Phantom of the Paradise and everything. Interviewed the producer, Edward Pressman. He has a history with the film because it was a grassroots thing, the financing of this film, and going to his family and shooting in his family's toy factory rather. And, the scenes in the Sing Sing prison, the toy factory, are actually in Edward Pressman, the Pressman toys. And, again, all of these, the drummer interview with the drummer, interview with John Alvin's wife, the late John Alvin, the guy who, as I said, painted the neon kind of stylized stuff, poster for Phantom of the Paradise that I don't really like, but it's great listening to her because she assisted John Alvin, and she talks a little about the technique of how he worked and how airbrushing worked and how difficult it was to do in the 70s and the changes that need to be made to the poster after all the lawsuits. And so, my God, it's just a smorgasbord of extras. I'll be going through this for, another couple weeks, just, off and on, just digging into it. And it's a great thing. The only disappointment is that half the extras are HD, the Blu-ray track, the Blu-ray movie, and then some of the extras. the long documentary and the detail and the Guillermo del Toro interview and the other stuff are on a DVD and they're in SD. And so that's, come on. And then also the full film is not on the DVD. That's also another thing to point out, is that it's just a DVD of extras. The main movie is not on that DVD. So that's so it's like, okay, so it's a DVD with more extras, but at least I also get the movie. No, you don't. You have to have dual DVD Blu-ray releases. Okay. And, sometimes I like them because I can pop in the DVD on my computer. I have a lot of computers and laptops that they don't have a Blu-ray drive, but every laptop produced in the past, 5 years, 10 years, almost all of them have an optical drive, a DVD drive. So, you can pop that in and really enjoy it, but the DVD. But with this one, you can't do that, which I would like to do with this one because it's got so many great extras and some great music, and I'd just like to, pop it in. I should also mention that recently the soundtrack was re-released in like a little mini LP, like those little cardboard things, and I don't know if it's any good, but remastered, a limited edition, and so if you're a real Phantom nut, you might want to pick that up at the same time as pick up the Blu-ray. Though I think it's the main album. I think it's the original album, which doesn't have all the music, It doesn't have all that little, stuff that Paul Williams did, like Never Thought I'd Get to Meet the Devil, or the ending track, the wedding scene, which was all Paul Williams music, or the score by Tipton. I forget the actual man who actually composed the underscore, the non-Paul Williams underscore, that kind of like silent movie type music and stuff. He's great as well. But overall, it's a great Blu-ray release that if you're a fan of the film, you need to get it. If you're not a fan of the film, you need to get it and become a fan if you can afford to get this Blu-ray, and it's definitely worth a blind buy. The main question I've always had with Phantom of the Paradise over the years, in the past decade or so, I've had this question: is why the hell has someone not made a fucking musical out of this? This is a perfect film if you can make a fucking musical out of The Lion King, and if you make it like a play out of Spider-Man and the fucking, Disney shit, this is great music, this will sit right against, Tommy or some kind of rock opera. ABBA, they made a goddamn musical Dancing Queen, ABBA and ELO, and come on, man, Xanadu. My God, Xanadu is having a resurgence. Xanadu. Well, none of these did that great. Granted, Queen, We Will Rock You. What the? That's fine. That's great. Queen is great. ABBA's great. I love all that stuff. But Phantom of the Paradise is actually a real story. And it has a real drive, and it's just like waiting there, sitting with somebody like, please play me on stage. Imagine a great musical actress singing like Old Souls on a stage. Imagine how that would really get to an audience, or maybe it would not. You have to come to the realization that maybe you're listening to this, maybe you're a big fan of the film. I'm obviously a huge fan of the film. Maybe it's, to do a stage play, that's millions and millions of dollars. You need a property like a Disney film, or The Producers, or Young Frankenstein, or, something that has a certain visibility in pop culture. And Phantom of the Paradise really does not have that visibility, And Paul Williams is still kind of marginalized to an extent, His image, I think, has really had a certain reconditioning as the new generation has kind of awakened, and people like Daft Punk have started using Paul Williams, and people have kind of gotten into the retro and the kitsch, and that stuff, again, over the past decade has had a kind of a beautiful resurgence. But, Paul Williams right now is apparently doing like a Pan's Labyrinth musical. He's writing a song for that. It's like, Jesus Christ, why not write a fucking Phantom of the Paradise musical? I guess according to the interview with Brian DePlama on this Blu-ray, they tried to do a musical a number of times and it just failed. And Brian DePlama wanted to do like this really experimental thing which would like involve the audience. It'd be like characters coming out of the audience and making the audience part of the show. Very much like his early experiments in film with Dionysus of '69, where there's a kind of a blurring between the performers and the audience. That it's this kind of workshopped experimental theater type thing. So that could work. A traditional play could also work. But otherwise, Phantom, it's a little gem, a little beautiful thing. I hope you love it as much as I do, and that's all I have to say about it. The thing I want to end with is check out this Blu-ray. Watch the film again. Somehow, you don't have to watch this Blu-ray. Watch the film somehow, some way. Check it out again, because it's just a beautiful film, and it's definitely a little cult gem that you can experience anew every time you watch it, and great film, just a great film.
My music is for Phoenix. Only she can sing it. Anyone else that tries dies.
Phoenix.
Phoenix.
Well, you told me one time that you'd be somebody, that you weren't working just to survive.
B.
It's gonna snow! Whoa, whoa, wow!
Man, you better get yourself a castrato for this.
Paul Williams as Swan.
And the angels that defeated them.
I want you to stop terrorizing the paradise and rewrite your cantata.
And the Phantom.
Stop and try me, only you might satisfy me,
Phantom of the Paradise.
There really is the Phantom.